the home of evocative conversation when black men talk. I'm your host, Mark Elliott. Been doing this for quite some time. I'm not even going to kind of put a date or years on how long we've been doing this, but I just love doing what I do. And I love the fact that from people all around this country, give us an ear. Keep on doing that. And we thank you for it. From time to time, I do things a little different. Since the show started, we kind of always had guests come in and kind of basically speak. And for the most time, there was a period of time when myself and two other gentlemen basically held it down for a while. But lately, it's really been just me and having different people coming in. I started two different segments of Common Ground, Up from the Ashes, and pretty soon it's going to be A Story of Love. I got a couple of segments I'm going to be starting too. And I love the fact how when Black Men Talk is expanding and it's growing. But something else I love, I had this gentleman on for a little while ago, Brother Sepp, and he spoke of his life coming out of Africa. And towards the end of that episode, he was saying he wanted to come back. And I'm telling him the door is always open. So I want to welcome him back in. My brother Sepp, how you feeling?
Hey, how we doing, brother? How we doing? All is well, brother. Thanks for having me again, man.
Oh, man, anytime, man. Anytime. You know, at some point, I'm going to give you a key, bro. You can come on. I'm not even here. Just come on.
No doubt, no doubt.
I had sometimes these ideas come to me, man. What happened to being kind? And I thought about that for a minute because that's a word you don't even hear that much often anymore. Kind. You just don't hear. And it's like almost in the sense that we just kind of either walk away from it or we step into it from time to time, but it's not a word that's used often. And kind is basically being benevolent in a generous nature. And I wanted to, start there in a sense because how does one maintain the nature of generosity and adopt to the possible or positive intentions that basically fall underneath the word kind?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think it gets started? Actually, how do you think that gets started?
What, as far as me make sure I'm understanding you correct. As far as with the with being kind?
Yes, it's funny because I think for me when I think of kind, it has to grow somewhere. So where was the initial? How does someone? We can make up a human being, let's say an individual 25 years old, but that person is kind. How does that person develop their kind nature, that generous nature of being kind? How does that get started? How does that get fostered in someone's life?
Oh, okay. I got you now, brother. My opinion, man, I really do believe that when it comes to, that word kindness and the character of being kind, I honestly think that it's one of those things that we as human beings are, I believe that it's in us from birth. I believe it's in us from birth and based on the environment in which we are exposed to while growing up or while coming up, could somewhat change or alter that. And to where, if you see things in your environment that's not allowing you to be able to exercise that kindness that's in you, since birth, I feel like, a part of you, your mind, your body, soul, I guess we could say, finds a way to just ignore that, and then you just basically adapt to the environment in which you're in and what you're exposed to, whether it's in the household. We all know of people that, that households, of course, that, things aren't right. We have adults that are communicating with kids however way they want to communicate with them and not remembering or not thinking about the fact that they're children and the things that they're installing into to these children's, mind early in the growing stage. I feel like that definitely takes effect in the full development, So by the time that individual is 25, if they weren't exposed to kindness or if they weren't exposed to, if they weren't exposed to kindness, how would they even know how to utilize it, And it's utilize something that they already have, you know what I mean?
No, you're right on point. You're right on point, Tim. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's interesting because I want to pull something out of something you said because you said the household that they grew up in, and thing for me has always been how were you raised? We go back to old school of we've been raising children and doing things with kids, and a lot of times now the raising of children is done a lot different than it was when I was, back when I was a youngster. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times then when a person wasn't kind, reality would be where we start to look back at the parents. what role did the parents play in a child's life as this person as an adult? How were they effective in instilling the kindness? Because you're right, your environment will start to dictate. But I'm a firm believer, if it starts out when you're young, when you're a child, and it's kind of instituted into you then, it's ingrained into you when you're young. And basically, as you start to mature and grow, it's hard to walk away from that. I just thought about something real quick, man, because when I was younger, we couldn't even, I look at people littering now. I know this might be going off the path a little bit, but I look at people that kind of litter. When I was young, you couldn't throw that out the window. You couldn't think about littering. And you could not, you're just something you couldn't do. Now, when I became of age, I became older, it was hard for me to litter. It was just hard for me to throw something out the litter because it was so beat into me that we just don't do that. It's not something you do. So I take that same mindset when it comes to kindness, because I think in reality, it kind of starts there with the home training, the home, basically how kids are raised for the most part, being considerate of others, thinking about others and kind of, thinking of others in a sense where in a kind sense. And that's where I think a lot of times we have gotten away from that. We've gotten away from basically from the childhood of what kids are basically and we're expecting them to do. And again, if a child is being raised in a home where the parents aren't kind and they coming out from underneath that, that's going to have a foundation. They're not going to be kind as well. But that being said, I want to think about this because I think another reason why kind basically is maybe not as popular as it used to be in a sense, the kindness, empathy, because to a lot of people, it tends to lead to a thought of weakness. And instinctively, when we come across someone that's kind, you could be dealing with someone that's kind, you meet them for the first time and they're kind to you. Instinctively, our natural thought and sentiment is that, what's up with this person? Because we're not, we're not used to that anymore. And I want to kind of take our mind there for a second. How did that get translated to us in a sense where when we come across someone for the first time and they're just being kind, the mindset or the thought of weakness appears without even thinking about it?
Right. Yeah. No, that is so true, man. That is so true. And, growing up and coming up too, I was, guilty of it to where, if I were to meet an individual, whether it's a male or female, teacher, librarian, whoever I would meet, as soon as I'm exposed to them being nice and, and kind, I'm kind of set back because I'm thinking to myself, you're nice and kind. Why are you nice and kind? You know what I mean? To me, because I'm only used to, individual in my household being nice and kind to me. Usually when, in the environment which we grew up and we came up, when individuals being kind around you, is because they either wanted something or needed something from you, or there was something that they were doing that they didn't want you to know. So we were always taught, in our household that to be mindful of that, So here I am outside the household and individuals being nice to me. I'm kind of sit back and I'm questioning, like, why are you kind to me? You know what I mean? Because I'm not used to this, And in our reality, in generality, as I'm older and I realize that maybe those individuals truly were genuinely being just kind and that's just who they were by nature, but just the environment that, and what I was taught, growing up, made a decision, based on how I view those individuals. And if we look at like history, and we talk about like history of our people that look like us, or history of just people that were in bondage or people that were enslaved, it always started off with generosity. It always started off with this group of individuals being generous. And, the person that's coming there with their intentions, now gets leverage, and they take advantage of, of the kindness that, that individual, that group of people were giving out, and they take advantage of it. So I think history definitely plays a big role on, why we make our decisions the way we do when it comes to somebody being kind,
No, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you're right. It does. It plays a part because, we kind of sense, when someone is kind in a way, we kind of think they're weak and we're thinking they're kind of trying to basically set us up for something as a possibility. And our past, you're right, has a lot to do with that. I remember, it's kind of similar to this. I remember in my 20s, I moved to Carolinas to work down there, South Carolina. And, growing up in the Northeast, for the most part, Northeast is not back then wasn't the kindest place to go be around. No one really speaks to you if they don't know you. They kind of look at you in a sense,
Right.
in the defense mechanism. Everybody's kind of basically, kind of for the most part trying to fill you up, not really being warm and kind to you. So when I first moved to South Carolina, I was driving right, and everybody's waving, speaking, and talking. And my head would be like, are they talking to me? Are they being kind to me? It took me a while to really understand that, to where it's like from a different region, they looked at it totally different. You had people smiling at me. And I'm like, yeah, smiling at me. I'm like, what are they smiling for? If they smile and they're waving. And it took me a little while, but I adapt to it, because for the most part, they was just being who they are naturally. They weren't being afraid to be looked upon as being weak or anything. That's just the way they carry on. And I mean, from anyone, everyone. I remember people would basically walk by me. I get out of my vehicle, had a Connecticut license plate. They would just start conversations, start talking things about Connecticut. They got family there. They know restaurants here. And I'm like, I'm not used to this. Just not used to this.
That is so true, brother.
Yes.
You hit the nail on the coffin on that example, man, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely, I know how you felt, bro, because when I moved here to Connecticut from North Carolina, starting my whole journey with Amtrak and all this, man, I mean, I came here, I was down in, training center where they send us to. And once when I realized that I was going to get through the program, I think I had about 2 weeks left of the program. And that's when I called my father, and I took the train down. And after taking the train down for the first time, and I packed up all my stuff and I drove north. I got to Delaware. We hung out for a little bit after the 2 weeks was done. I had all my stuff pretty much, in boxes and, in the back of my SUV. And we drove up. I drove up actually, And when I landed in Connecticut, it was my second time. Actually, no, it was my third time in Connecticut. First time was for the interview. Second time was for me to go view the apartment that I was going to be staying in. And then third time was actually when I was done with the whole program and I was actually moving. And I remember the next day when I went to the Walmart that was near the location where I was staying. And, I'm saying, excuse me, good morning, how are you, to the cashier. And the lady just didn't acknowledge me. And I'm like, man, am I speaking loud enough? I'm saying it louder. And she's just looking at me. So I'm looking like, okay, she must be having a terrible day. I go to Dunkin' Donuts. I order my coffee. I'm saying thank you to the young lady. And she's like, not even responding to me. I said, what in the world? I go to the gas station. I'm pumping gas. And then I hand the clerk the money. And instead of him handing me the money, he puts the money on the counter. I said, what in the world? And I'm talking to him. I'm looking like, don't put my money in the counter. I just hand you the money. How about you hand me the money? And then he grabbed the money and he handed it to me with aggression and attitude. I said, wow. So, I sat back for a little bit and I started observing people and I'm like, man, this is crazy. So I asked the individual that's been here all their life and they told me, man, listen, this is not the South, man. This is not North Carolina. This isn't South Carolina. It says people here, this is just the way the North is, man. And I was like, wow, and then obviously I seen it, not saying that everybody's bad, but I definitely seen that, and I understanding your example. It was definitely a culture shock for me.
Yeah, man, I can only imagine. And I like the fact when you brought about the money put in an account. It's funny, as men, there's certain things about us that piss us off. And I'm the same way. If I put money in your hand, you better put my money back in my hand. You're not putting my money on the counter. No, realistically. Now, if you want that, tell me when I'm giving you money and I'll put the money in the counter and we could go from there. But I feel you with that. Because that's something that, and that haven't happened to me in a long time, but I remember in the past when it did, I handled it the same way you did. If I put it in your hand, here's what you're going to do. And they would come back and do it. But an interesting thing too about kindness, man, and I think for men, this is something that kind of basically, we spoke with the word soft earlier, and that's the last thing most men want to be perceived as, is that, that they're soft for whatever reason. And parts of society has drilled that into us. Do not be soft. For the most part, don't even be in touch with your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts in so many ways, just not be. And the word that came out of that is hard. And to me, when hip hop music really kind of came on the scene, it took it perpetuated, it took it to a new level. And we started walking around trying to be hard for no reason. And a lot of times I looked at somebody that's trying to be hard as being scared.
Scared, man.
Yes. I remember my nephew years ago, He was late teens. And he was walking by and he was trying to be all hard. And I pulled him to the side and I said, look, man, I said, playing hard doesn't make you hard. Looking hard don't make you hard. I said, to me, you're coming across like you're being scared. I said, you don't have to walk around to show anyone that you're tough. You don't have to. And I think a lot of times as males, especially young males, we are afraid. And the way that we kind of shield people to think that we're kind of keeping people away from us and kind of protecting us in a self-defense mode is that we walk around and we carry this exterior of trying to be hard. And again, there's elements of society has kind of preached that to us to where you need to be this, you need to be that, or the case may be. And my point is, as a man, you should have all those things in your wheelhouse, in your toolbox. When it's time to be rough and hard, you got it. But I don't have to walk around, display that all the time for people to think something about me that I'm trying to sell them. And I think reality as men, we have gotten caught up in that, and we have taken that way too far. Your response to it, sir?
Yes, sir. I'm absolutely 100% with you on that, my brother. 100% with you, man. My wife and I, it's funny, we talk about this, but my wife and I, we had just had a conversation like this about, 2 days ago about, our brothers and sisters in our community, people that look like us, and one of the things that I was telling her, I had an individual on the train. And this individual, it couldn't have been. If I say he was 23, 24, I'll be putting more age on him than what he really was, man. I don't think he was a day past 24. He was a young brother, man. I mean, he was put together, and he just had this look on him, and I went to him and asked him for his ticket, and the kid got super upset and said, I ain't got no ticket. I'm not going to pay. So I'm like, oh, man, this kid. And then he just became this angry and just aggressive. And I was like, man, I can't deal with this. So unfortunately, I had to do my job. I had to tell him, hey, listen, man, you got to get off wherever. The kid got off. And it just dawned on me. And I'm thinking to myself. And I got home and I told my wife, I said, listen, I came across this young brother, man. I mean, handsome kid, man. He looked like, he's definitely was going through something or thinking about something, and I tried my best to talk to him. Just to try to, reason with him. But once when he started getting aggressive and verbally aggressive around people, and at that point, I had to do my job, and I had to let this individual, get off at the next stop. And I really, really wanted to help this kid, man. But I was asking my wife, I said, what could that kid honestly really be going through at the age that he is, man? What could he really be dealing with at home or his environment that has this individual acting this way, man? Because it's like, it was so sad because I tried to reason with the kid. I tried to basically show him generosity. I tried to talk to him just kind of like the way you spoke to your nephew. And I'm like, listen, this ain't it, man. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason for you to be this way. Whatever you are dealing with, whatever you are mad at, I can guarantee you someone down the line has it worse than what you have, brother. There's no reason for you to come at me like this. I'm not the enemy, my friend. You know what I'm saying? I'm here to help you if you need me to help you. I'm here to talk to you, man. Talk to me. And that's one of the things, too, that I feel like in our community, we lack that a lot, man. We lack that a lot, And I would say definitely when it comes to this music industry, and I mean, I see it in my country, in Africa, too, because American hip hop and American rap is so big, worldwide that it took influence. It influenced our people back home too, to where now when you go home, the same thing that you will see here in the neighborhoods with kids sagging and kids acting tough and with the gun on their waist and selling drugs and in gangs. That's the same thing going on at home too. And it never used to be like that when we were there. We seen it, but it wasn't. Now with the whole, like society and social media and music industry, that stuff is big in our communities, just the way it is here, man. And one of the things I told my wife, I said, it's sad about this kid, man. And also I told her we could be at a cafe, me and her, at a diner. There's a spot we like to go to near the house here in Westfield, Bella's Cafe. And one of the things that I told her, and I'm like, I counted 4 brothers walked in, man. And I made eye contact. And Mark, you know that head nod that we would give each other.
Yes,
we don't have to say nothing. I give you that nod, you give me that nod in return. And that's just what we know in our community. You know what I'm saying? And I did this to every single one of them. Neither one of them acknowledged me. Neither one of them. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, if it was the young me, I would say, man, I'm a punk. Like, why am I even bothering to talk to these dudes or trying to communicate with them? They're not even giving me a time of day. You know what I'm saying? But I'm beyond that. You know what I mean? And it was just, to me, it was just sad because, like, I'm like, this is the main problem. This is why, you know what I'm saying, a true example of, why we are not united, why there's no unity in our environment, in which we grew up in and we raise our kids in, because of that. Here, these brothers, they don't know me from nothing. They're just walking in, going about their business, but they seen me, they acknowledged me, but they didn't even respond. They didn't even, and it was just sad, man. And I'm like, wow, I said to my feet, this supports what I always tell you about, what happened to where brothers could just see each other and just say hello to each other. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to carry a long conversation. We don't have to, know about each other's names. Like what happened to just saying, hey, bro, how you doing this morning? Especially us brothers, it's hard, to begin with. Coming up, what I'm saying, in our environment and trying to, be successful, looking like the way that we do in the environment in which we're trying to be successful in, to where, sometimes we feel like we're backed into a corner, sometimes we feel like our voices ain't heard, in the environment in which we're working and play in the workplace. And once when we see somebody else that look like us, and whether it's in a workplace or a store or a gas station, and that individual quick to say hello, whatever, what's the problem with you just saying hello back, But when you look at other communities, Mark, and these communities, you know what I'm saying, the men in those communities, man, like even if they don't even like each other, even if they have true beef with each other, man, we would never see that. We would never see that. You know what I mean? And they will still, put a hand out to help each other out, when that individual's in need. And they'll even say, I don't like this person, but at the end of the day, he needs help. I'm going to help this person. I don't like this person, but he said hello. I'm going to say hello back. It's just, we just don't have that in our community. And I really think that when it comes to the, the environment in which we grew up in, music industry is definitely huge, it plays a big part of that. And, just the way the world is moving, man, with all this technology and social media and everybody just flaunting and showing, a lifestyle in which ain't true, and our kids are exposed to that stuff, brother,
Yes, sir. I tell you, this When Black Men Talk, myself, Mark Elliott, and Brother Sep, you can see why now I wanted this gentleman on the show. I wanted him, his insight, his depth on the show, because there's not a lot of young cats. When I say younger cats, I am maybe twice this man's age that can go and be deep as where he is and speak and have the intellectual conversation that this brother brings forth. And I am happy. When I say this, I am super happy to have him here. It's, I love some things you touch on, man. I'm gonna pick on one thing because about the head bobbing. I remember years ago, Farrakhan did the Million Man March in Washington, D.C. And there's some things he said, but there's something he said I always took from there. And I always felt this, prior to hearing him saying it, I felt the same thing. He said, we should never, it's not that many of us walking on the face of the earth. When you think about it, compared to the mass, we're not. When the word minority comes out, it comes out for a reason, because there's not that many of us. So therefore, when one of us sees another one in a place, we should not walk by in some form or fashion, acknowledge or greet the other one. We should not. And I mean, that was so poignant to be said, and it's true. And we take that for granted. We do. We just act like it's no big deal. And you're right. In other communities, they may not like, care, but the mere fact, if you're from that community, you have some linkage to that community, they're going to make sure you're okay. They will go out of their way to make sure you're okay. And it doesn't really cost a lot. They're not breaking their back. But again, how did they get to that point? Because I believe that was instilled in them as a child. That was that pride of their culture, who they are as people, was instilled, as opposed to, and this is going to go off the bandwagon a little bit, maybe when I'm talking about kind, but it is what it is. How can you instill that in your people as a mother and father if you're walking around calling somebody a name that looks like you, that wasn't given to you to represent the person you're calling that name? Of course I'm gonna come up and don't think I have to respect that person. Of course I'm gonna come up and think I don't have to speak to that person. Of course I'm gonna come up and do all that I can to disrespect that person, because you as my parent, you as my guardian, you as my teacher.
Guardian, yeah.
Yes, if you will basically put me in an environment where all I heard all things were detrimental things about people that look like me, if you gave me a 6-letter word to respond to people that look like me, and you said it every single day, every sentence coming out of your mouth, how the hell am I going to walk down the street and see somebody that kind of represents what you was talking about and feel the need to be kind to? And that's the part that, to me, that's really obvious when what we're dealing with, because we don't realize the self-damage we've done for ourselves, to ourselves. And then basically it plays out in many ways. And that's to me, that's one segment of it right there. The damaging, I'll go back what I said earlier about the upbringing. That's damaging. And yet again, if you're sitting around playing home in your home, in your car, you're playing music that talks about yourself, people that look like you, to be nothing of worth or value, easy to take their lives. It doesn't mean anything. The meaning, how could you raise up to become in your 20s or 30s or 40s and think that, yes, when I walk by someone like that, I should honor, respect that person? And that's where we are, bro. And to me, that's where we are. And that's why when I say what happened to being kind, it's really not a small question. It's a huge question, because
very huge. You know?
Yeah, there's so many things that go into it that really kind of fester inside of it to where we're acting it out. And you talked about social media. You got to be kidding. I mean, social media is what it is to a lot of different people, but it's been another thing that has been a vehicle for us to not to benefit us in the way that it could have, in my opinion. And that's, you're right. It's showing different things, different elements. And as you spoke about earlier, when you went back home, how, the same things that's going on here. I go back to the conversation I had earlier about South Carolina. When I was down there years ago, bro, none of that stuff was there. It just wasn't. Go back there now. Go back. I mean, it's like a totally different world. You go back, and it's amazing. It's like a totally different world. And come on. And some of that basically comes back to simple kindness, whether we want to believe it or not. It comes back to, because if you have that instilled inside of you, you not want to hurt someone or be disrespectful to someone and discourteous to someone that easy. It really is, man. And a lot of times, as I said earlier about the softness, it comes down to a defense mechanism. But I want to I want to spin this a little bit to where, because a lot of times unkindness carries a mixture of negative emotions, insecurities, and past traumas. And a lot of times, for the most part, we get stuck in our insecurities. This one kind of involves men and women. We kind of get stuck there. Things that may have happened in our life that we're not happy with. It could be a variety of things, whatever the case may be. And when that tends to happen, and that trauma, we kind of push ourselves into a world of meanness. And that meanness becomes comfortable because we don't know anything else. And we're lashing out at others that had nothing to do with the reason why you're angry. Nothing to do, but we find a reason to lash out, make them pay the price for something that someone else may have done to you. And I'm not sure if we are really aware how we're doing that subconsciously. That's what we're doing. We're taking hurt from our past. And I'm not talking about going way back in ancient past either. It could be a hurt of it could be a hurt of a loved one. It could be hurt of a parent, or something that we are not working through our traumas and our pain, and it's playing out. You could go in the supermarket, man. I'm sure you experienced this, and you could push your car by someone or carriage by someone, and they look at you like you stole their last dollar.
Yes. Or you bump them a little bit. Don't bump them. Even if you say, "Excuse me," I've had them. They look at you like, "Man, if hurts can kill, if looks can kill, I'd have been dead a long time ago, brother. A long time ago, I'd have been dead, man." And it's sad. And like you said, it's men or women, black or white, Spanish. It don't matter. It's everyone. It's like, wow, I'm sorry.
Oh man! And you think when you say "I'm sorry," it allows you some grace? Not really. And here's the interesting thing about I'm saying I'm sorry. Trust me, it doesn't stop me from saying it when it's necessary. But people take someone saying "I'm sorry" as another sign of being weak.
Yes.
And that people will absolutely avoid saying that word, thinking that if they say it, it basically demonstrates or illustrates them as being weak. It's the dumbest freaking idea that you can have.
I agree 100%, man.
Yeah.
For sure.
If we spent half the time in our mind trying to stop being hard and be nice and kind and give that type of energy, our world, our life would be much better. Our individual lives would be much better.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You will be much happier. And and I was talking to my wife. We're talking about the whole trauma, and there's a book that she read on it, and and I told her, I said, listen, man, my opinion with that, it's like, especially, when you have one individual that's gone through things, like for myself, like if I were to sit down and tell people the things I've seen and heard or things I've been exposed to, sometimes, those people, when I tell people, information about myself or my past, and they're like, man, how do you still have a smile on your face? Or how do your parents still have a smile on your face? You know what I'm saying? Or when I hear other people's stories and I see that these people are still happy, they're smiling, they're being kind, and they're just basically living life, and they're just appreciating every time that they get the breath of life every morning when they wake up. At the end of the day, that's really what it's about, And I feel like if you're dealing with trauma, if you've seen something or you've dealt with something that, in your past, like you said, it's one of those things where, it's okay for you to open up and talk. You know what I'm saying? It's okay for you to open up and talk to somebody, either a professional or somebody that, that knows how to deal with people, with your issue. It's okay for you to open up and talk. And the more, like you said, the more you talk, and the more you express yourself and you open up to it, you know what I'm saying? And you're able to express yourself, you are really, in the long run, you are really saving yourself, saving your life. And now you don't have to walk around and act all tough and look all tough, and knowing deep down inside, you are just fighting so many demons. You know what I mean? And I really think that definitely has a play, also, in why, we walk around, with this whole toughness and this whole demeanor of, I have to be tough and I have to be this, because of what I went through, because of what I've seen. You don't know that individual that you bumped the car. You don't know what they've seen and what they've been through. You know what I'm saying? And that individual just said sorry for bumping your cart, and the only response that you can give him is, is just aggression and anger. You don't know that individual could have been worse. He could have went through a worse trauma, worse trauma than what you've experienced. And not to degrade one person's trauma, against another person's trauma, but at the end of the day, we don't know what those individuals are going through, because they have a life too, and if that individual has said sorry for bumping you in the aisle because it was tight, you know what I'm saying, acknowledge it and say, nah, it's all right, don't even give that face, but like I said, if you're not handling trauma, or you're not handling any issue, it's going to be hard for you to be able to express any love and kindness to anybody else.
No, you're right, man. I'm gonna ask you this, and not to go into detail, but you spoke of, you went through a lot, you saw a lot of this different things and stuff of that nature, but yet I could say, bro, it hasn't been a time that I've bumped into you over the years. I have not seen your joy. I've not seen your happiness. So what I want to focus on here is, how did you maintain that joy, that happiness that you carry with everything that you've experienced and everything that you have witnessed and seen in your lifetime? How did you find yourself to wake up each morning, bro, Sep, and basically?
Man, honestly, man, I put God first. That's always been, how we were brought up, and I'm saying. And as I became an adult, and I started realizing, that, man, prayer does work, fasting work, and actually giving, I'm saying, yourself, up and praying and trying to basically, do the right thing, to others, to yourself, and to others, And as I'm getting older, I start noticing, aunties that are no longer around. And I start noticing, friends that are no longer around, friends that are my age that are coming down with illnesses that somebody who's 90 will be getting, and they're coming down with it and they're passing, or everything for some, some of my, a friend of mine, everything was so good. And then he found out he was ill and he only had like 6 months. So it's little things like that, man. It's actually, those are big major things like that I see. And then I have to sit back and analyze myself. You know what I mean? That's one of the things I tell my wife, it's like, I can never stop. I read this book years back, and, the individual, he was a, philosopher, theology major. And he was talking about, like, you should never stop working on yourself, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally. You should never stop working on yourself, because every single day we change. Intentions change. Feelings change. Today you like steak. Your taste buds tomorrow may not like the steak the way it's made that way. Even your taste buds change. So we as individuals, as we age and as we're exposed to, experiences, we will change, And that is why it's super important for you not to, for you to never stop working on yourself, because at the end of the day, once you stop working on yourself and you think you're set, and you think you're all set, now when your situation changes, now you're confused and you're trying to figure out like, whoa, what's going on? I thought I had everything situated, mentally, emotionally, physically. What happened? You know what I mean? So I always tell myself, obviously, pray, go to sleep, pray, wake up, pray, and just give thanks, man, and every time I go to a checkup, something simple as an annual checkup at the dentist or the doctors, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just praying to God that God, don't find anything. Hopefully I'm good, I feel like I'm healthy, but you just don't know, you know what I mean? And then the minute those results come back and check, everything is good, I'm celebrating. I'm super happy about that because there's someone down the line that, that took the same physical I took and their results may not reflect what mine reflect, you know what I mean? And now they got to try to deal with this now and there's this new thing in their life, you know what I mean? And I have children, you know what I'm saying? And, and I want to be there for them just like my parents were there for me, you know what I mean? At the end, and every moment and chance that I do get to spend with them, it's important, and that's what brings me joy. Obviously we get tired, we get sleepy, we get, physically, we feel like I can't get up today. I got to lay down. I got to try to, all that, I got to rest. All that is important. But at the end of the day, for me, waking up every day, and giving thanks and the fact that I'm able to wake up and I'm healthy and I'm able to still provide for my family financially, provide for my family with, kindness and joy, genuine kindness and joy. You know what I mean? I'm very thankful for that, man. You know what I mean? Obviously, coming up, I saw a lot, and I've been through a lot, man. And at the end of the day, and it's like, at the end of the day, all that stuff, it did happen, and it was important, and I feel like it had to happen, to mold me to who I am today, you know what I mean? Because one of the things that, I was always told growing up with my father is, God will never give you things that he know that you can't handle, you know what I mean? He will never put you in a position, in a position in which he feels and knows that you cannot handle. Everything that he gives you, whether it's issue, problem, everything that he throws at you or he push you through, he knows that you'll be able to get through it. You just have to believe, and that is one of the things that I've always stuck with. And I just try to move like that, good brother. You know what I'm saying? And, I just try to move like that, man. And when my day's bad, I sit down and think and pray and say, oof, let me, get a reset, and let me really try to analyze and think about, why am I really mad right now? Why am I really upset? You know what I mean? What is really upsetting me? And I have to question myself that, you know what I mean? And I feel like that is important. We should definitely take a responsibility and questioning ourselves whenever we make, certain actions or we say certain things to others that was angry, or we act a certain way, or we act a certain way. You know what I'm saying? Before that person can tell you, hey, Mark, you hurt my feelings. How about you question yourself? Was it right that you did that to that individual? And that is one of the things that I took upon when I read that book, and it was just like, that really changed my life, you know what I'm saying? As far as how I view, certain things,
Bro, I want everything you just said just to simmer for a few seconds, man. I'm gonna quiet it down because you could not have said anything better than that. You really couldn't have, man. Bro, that was beautiful, man. Deep and beautiful. And I'm glad it's being said here, man. I want us to take some time because you and I work in an environment where we get paid to kind of be kind and courteous in a sense. Yes. And we do that, but there's times I'm pretty sure that you have experience where not even being paid, you've done something kind and it just made you feel good. I'm going to share mine first and then I'll come to you. Years ago, I remember I was on the train and it was close to, I think it was Mother's Day weekend. It might have been that Thursday prior to Mother's Day. And this lady came on and she had one kid in a carriage and another kid was small. And she had a bunch of bags. And I remember grabbing her bags and bringing her on and moving her to her seat. And she got there and she stood there and she seemed overwhelmed. Like it was just, like it was just so much on her. And I said to her, you're an awesome mom. You are an awesome mom. Your kids are fortunate to have you. bruh, she basically thanked me and started crying.
Mm-hmm.
We moved close to each other, almost kind of like hugged. And it was just, I can't tell you, I just felt the need to say it to her, looking at her.
Mm-hmm.
And we never know at those moments what somebody's feeling and dealing with. It could have just been her overburdened with the kids, trying to catch the train, be on time, whatever she's facing. And no one maybe have said that to her in a while, or maybe said it to her at all. And that's just what I saw. And I spoke to it. And I think that's one thing, what we do in a sense, even, in some areas we are paid to do what we do. But I know there's times when we have basically went out of what we are ordinarily doing. And just because you spoke with the cat earlier, but I know there have been some times, and I know you well enough to know there's been some times where you step out, went above, and show some kind and courteousness to someone.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that was definitely, because who could only imagine what that young lady was going through. I mean, I have kids and I've traveled with them and without my wife, and it's a lot, man. Especially one in a carriage, the other one, and on your arm, and trying to pull bags and trying to make sure everybody's close together in a busy airport, a busy train station, making sure you're not losing anyone. You know what I mean? And it's definitely overwhelming, especially when you don't have help. And then if you're already dealing with whatever mental stress or whatever mental issue or financial issue or whatever issue you're going through, and in your life, and and then that on top of that, and for her to hear you say that, you know what I mean? That was genuine, you know what I mean? And she definitely needed to hear that, you know what I mean? And that's why, and I speak and I say, and I'm always a firm believer that, God, he puts people in our lives, or he puts individuals in our life for a reason. And there was a reason why God made sure that you and her crossed paths, because he knew that she needed to hear that,
Yes.
And he used you, you know what I'm saying, as his servant. He used you, man, to say that, you know what I mean? He used you, and you said what you had said, because you didn't know nothing about this woman, know nothing. You just seen her with the kids, and you could see that it's a lot going on. And, it just came out your mouth and you said it, you know what I mean? It's not like you woke up in the morning and you knew that you was going to encounter this woman and you were going to say these things. You didn't know. And that is what I say when I went with genuine compassion. You know what I mean? That's a true, example of what genuine compassion is, when, like you said, you just find yourself being kind and you're not even realizing that you're doing it. You know what I'm saying? It's just happening, and it's like another, it's like something else that's just taking over your body, that's moving for you and talking for you. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I tell people, there's a reason why God places people, in our lives, whether it's for 1 minute, whether it's for 2 minutes, whether it's for 10 years, whether it's for 5 years. You know what I mean? And, that's definitely important, man. And for me, this is a few years ago, man. This is, I want to say this was like right after COVID, when everything opened back up. I was on the train working to New York. And we get to Stanford, we get a load of people get on the train, and now at this point, some were wearing masks, some weren't wearing masks. It wasn't mandatory; you could wear it if you want. We were in that stage at that particular time, and I remember, coming across a young lady, and I believe I can't remember where she was from. She was from somewhere in the Caribbean islands, and I came across her, and she looked very distraught. She was she looked very sad, and it was just like, man, who knows what to expect. So I went to her and I asked her for a ticket, and then she gave me her ticket, and the ticket that she gave me, it was only to New York. So then she questions me. She goes, did I give you the right ticket? I said, yeah, you gave me the right ticket. So then I get ready to leave, and then she stops me. She says, I really need to get to Philadelphia. I said, okay. I said, well, you can always extend your destination. I can call a number and help you out. You can call and, we can set it up, and I get your card information and you go from there. Or, because at the time we weren't accepting cash on the train. I said, or you can download the Amtrak app, purchase a ticket for this train from New York to Philly. You could do it that way too, whatever you feel comfortable, doing. And that's when she's like, okay. So I left to continue doing my job, bro. And finally we get to the next stop right before New Rochelle, obviously before New York. She stops me again and she tells me I'm having difficulty. So I said, let me see your phone. So, I looked at her phone and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, first of all, it was a smartphone, but it was like really old, and I was trying to, help her, hit certain buttons, and just the phone just wasn't reacting a certain way. It just wasn't working. So I told her, I said, listen, do you have another phone? She says, no, this is all I have. So I go, all right, listen, unfortunately, I get off in New York, so it's going to be very hard for me to try to accommodate you, to even try to help you, use conductor's discretion, like the way we say. And I don't know who this new crew is, and I don't know what you got going on, but I could try to help you when we get to New York. We walk over to Transit, and I could try to help you, use the kiosk machine and go from there. She was like, okay. So we leave. We finally get to New York. I step off. I go to the crew room. I come out to get ready to go get something to eat. The same young lady, she's right by the escalator, bro, crying. And I said, what in the world? So I seen her. I said, you all right? I said, what's wrong with you? Why are you crying for? She was like, too much is going on. I said, what's the problem? She was like, listen, I have a job that I probably already lost in Stanford, and I provide in-home care. And I just started the job, and I got a family emergency, and I got to get to Philly. And unfortunately, I got the kids that I got to get to Philly, and I don't have no other way to get to Philly. And the people that I was working for, as you can see, she had 2 big luggages. She was like, I was supposed to stay with them and take care of their loved one for 2 months. And then from there, I was supposed to come back. So the person was hospice and was in the hospice situation in Stanford. She was caring for that individual till that individual passed. And then she would come back after like 2 months or so. But she had to, leave with only being there for 3 days of working to handle the emergency that she had back home in Philly, Mark. So I said, all right, well, let's try to see if I can get you like transit or anything like that. She goes, I went there and they told me that the ticket is $19. I said, $19? I said, okay. I said, yeah, let's go. I'll show you how to process it. The woman looked at me and she started crying, Mark. And she said, sir, I don't have $19. I said, huh? I said, excuse me. So I stopped. And I said, say it again. I said, what is it? She said, I don't have $19. She pulled up. I said, you don't have to. She pulled up her bank account. She showed me this young lady only had like $3 and like some change, man. And then she showed me her Cash App. She had $1 in Cash App. And I'm sitting to myself and she was like, I used all the money that I had to buy this Amtrak ticket just to get to New York. And I got to try to figure out how to get to Philly. And I'm like, well, obviously she's definitely, going through something. And she's definitely not a fare invader because some people would just take their chances and stay on board the train to get to Philly and hope not to get caught. But she was trying to do the right thing. So I said, don't worry about it. I said, come on. So I got on my phone and I processed the ticket on my app because I have the Amtrak app on my personal phone, and then I paid for the ticket with her name, last name, whatever. And then I sent her the QR code, that they give us, and I sent it to her phone. And then it popped up on her email. And then I walked her down, and I put her on that Keystone train going to Philly. And, as we got to the platform, she stopped, and she just started crying. And she was like, can I give you a hug and can we pray? And gave me a hug and we should pray. And then she just basically she kept crying. I said, why are you crying? She was like, because, first of all, I'm embarrassed, and second of all, like you don't really come across people that are just willing, you've been helpful from the time you saw me. And I don't know what, what caused you or what, allows you to be so kind to me. I don't know. And I said, at the end of the day, you needed help. And I would hope that if I was in this situation or if my loved one was in this situation, that there would be help just like I helped you. At the end of the day, it's nothing, And for me, I'm thinking in my head as I'm saying this thing, it's just $19. But, I got home and I told my wife this story and I told her, I said, man, that's crazy because, here I am, blessed to have a job and blessed to have $19 and more in my pocket in my account. We have individuals that are just going through it really financially. And, something simple as $19, they can't even afford it. And that's another true example of why, I have to, work on myself every day and I have to give thanks every day because here I am. I have $19 and me spending the $19 on her to get her the ticket was nothing to me. You know what I mean? It didn't hurt me. It didn't make me. It didn't break me. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like I went above and beyond it. To me, it was $19. But to her, $19 was everything, And that made me sit back and say, man, I'm thankful. We all went through this whole COVID thing. I still had a job. My kids still had a roof over their head. They still had jackets to wear for the winter, and we all still had, a good life. No one got sick in my household. You know what I mean? And it's like, why I can't be thankful? You know what I'm saying? Going through, you know what I mean? Like, so, if I'm angry, what am I really mad about? You know what I'm saying? Just yesterday, I had a real good day. What am I mad about? And that's what I had, experienced, especially, and that was significant because that's never happened to me my whole career at Amtrak, going through and dealing with that, that was significant for me.
My brother Seth, man, that story touched my heart, bro. As you was telling it, man, that went into my heart. And like you said earlier, God puts us in certain places to help people. And sometimes when it's taking place, we're not even aware. But she knew from the first time, that you spoke with her. There's something about you that she, registered, that she knew that she can trust you, speak to you, and open up to you. And that's a lot of times too. People don't feel comfortable enough, open up and basically sharing. And like she said, she felt embarrassed to basically not have. She knew what she needed to go and why she needed to be there, but not have. And imagine that feeling of despair that she was carrying underneath those tears. And like you said, we are fortunate. We're blessed, to live daily. And sometimes, people take that for granted. We wake up with the breath of fresh air in our lungs, and we're able to do most of the things we want to do and accomplish in a day. And, that itself to me is a miracle every single day. Nothing short of a miracle. I want to basically kind of start to shut this down in a sense, but I want to say this first because Proverbs 16:24 says, kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. And I think if we kind of roll into that much more in our daily lives, the outcome would be so much different. I was going to move you and I into a conversation about perfect peace. But what I'm going to do, I want to save that for our next time we get together, because that needs a show all to itself. It doesn't
for sure.
Yeah, that's going to need some time all to itself, man. And I'm telling you, I'm looking forward to going into that with you, because again, boss, you speak for yourself. I don't have to say anything else. I already gave the flowers to you. I don't have to say anything else because you speak. I'm grateful that God has brought you into my life and have me witness you as you are, as we kind of, bump each other from time to time, and actually allow you to be right where you are right now speaking, man, because that's what I like. That's what I love. A young brother basically that can basically speak and people can resonate from the words that you're speaking, understand, find joy, find something about what you're saying. To me, it's nothing better than that for this platform. There's nothing better than that for this platform, and I'm happy to have it, and I'm happy to have you on it.
No doubt, my brother, and always a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you having me, and you know what I'm saying, and we're learning from each other, and who would have thought, like I said, we've seen each other in passing or working, with each other on different jobs and sites and trains and stuff, and look at that. Look how God works, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And here we are, my career being there, working on 15 years, and this now, after 15 years of being around each other, and then here we are, doing this thing together, man. It's just crazy how God works, and everything has its timing,
Yes, sir.
So this is our time, brother, and we gotta embrace it and go with it, man, till the train falls off, because I'm learning from you, you're learning from me, you know what I mean? And I told my wife, when she told me, when I told her about the, I'm gonna be talking to, she's like, oh, okay, what's the topic today? And now she's, she's super into it, and she's like, oh, I want to know what y'all gonna talk about. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, all right. I say, yeah, no doubt, so she definitely likes it, man, because she's like, it's a good thing for you to go out and talk, you know what I mean? Because like sometimes, you find yourself talking and you don't really listen to she always tells me that, do you really listen to everything that you say? You know what I mean? I say, what you mean by that? She was like, do you really listen to the things that you say, the things that come out your mouth, or when you're expressing what you're expressing, And, she was like, sometimes sit back and think about it. You know what I'm saying? And think about the things that you just said, or while you're saying it, try to write that stuff down, because she was like, it's moving. And I'm not just saying this because, I'm your wife, your friend, your spouse and all that, but I really think that, you really need to, So she's supportive about this, you know what I mean? Because This is my first time ever doing anything like this, you know what I mean? Usually, if we don't talk, or I don't talk to you about it, in person or on the phone, and a conversation comes up, then you wouldn't even know, you know what I mean? She's like, you like that millionaire that's walking around that don't nobody know he's got money, you know what I mean? Because you just walking around and, you just look like your average, brother just working and taking care of your family. But the minute you start talking, you're like, oh, damn, this dude got all this underneath his sleeve, And I said, really? She said, yeah. I said, oh, okay. So I really appreciate it, man, because, I feel free and open when I'm able to conversate and converse with you. And, especially on, different topics and stuff like that. And when she told me, when did he send you the topic? And I said, well, he told me about it today. And she was like, and you're able to talk about it today? You're not going to sit there and take notes? I said, no, I don't need no notes. I said, we're just going to talk about it, Or like when I did the other one with you, she was like, you're not going to write nothing down and try to pre-write what you're going to say. I said, no, I don't need that. So you're going to send it to me and I'm just going to talk. I said, whatever my heart tells me to say, and, and that's what I'm going to say, I feel comfortable enough to do that. You know what I mean?
Oh, man, I love it.
So I really appreciate you, brother. I really do, man. I thank you, man.
I thank you as well, bro. We're going to get together soon. Hang tight for a little while. I'll put the close the door on this. Man, gotta give me a second stop laughing. That is some good stuff right there. That's some good stuff. That's some good stuff, man. All right, folks. I want to thank you for giving us an ear. As brother said, myself, Mark Elliott, is when black men talk. And this is what black men sound like when they're really talking. When they're really speaking, this is what we sound like. This is what we sound like. And I'm happy we're able to bring this and bring this forth. Until next time we get together, God loves you. Don't think for a second, no matter what you're going through, he loves you. He will love you too. Take care of yourself.